Today, Liam Neeson steps onto a stage expecting a simple interview, but what unfolds will crack open his deepest grief and reveal a side of him no one has ever seen. Stay with us until the end to witness the moment Liam confronts the loss that has haunted him for years and discover the quiet truth that changes everything. The studio lights were dazzling, but not nearly as heavy as the weight Liam Neeson carried in his chest that day. Behind the curtain, where no camera reached, he sat quietly, fingers trembling as they traced the edge of a small, worn photograph. Natasha. The name echoed in his mind like a bell that never stopped ringing. Years had passed, yet the loss remained a silent companion, shadowing every success, every interview, every moment in front of the public eye. Today was supposed to be just another television appearance, another conversation, another polite exchange, another carefully polished public face. But something in Liam's gut told him this day was different. His heart raced not from nerves, but from a deep, aching sense that something unseen was about to stir. He slid the photo back into his pocket just as the stage manager called his name. On the other side of the curtain, the audience buzzed with anticipation. Tonight's guest wasn't just Liam Neeson. It was Liam with Jonathan Roumie, the man the world had come to associate with the role of Jesus in The Chosen. An odd pairing, many thought. What did the grizzled action hero and the gentle, faith-filled actor have to say to one another? The crowd roared as Liam stepped into the lights, smiling, shaking hands, playing the part they expected. But behind his eyes, a storm brewed. He sat, glancing across at Jonathan, who offered him a warm, steady gaze. The contrast between them was striking. One, all sharp lines and hardened features, the other soft-spoken, calm, with a presence that seemed to carry peace itself. The first questions came easily. They spoke of movies, of iconic roles, of Hollywood challenges. Liam chuckled, recounting the stunts, the intense shoots, the long nights. The audience laughed, delighted by his charm. But Jonathan didn't laugh much. He listened, intently. And then, without warning, the host turned the conversation. "What's the hardest thing you've ever faced off camera, Liam?" The words hung in the air, almost too sharp, too cutting. Liam's smile faltered. He glanced down for a moment, then back up, the mask slipping ever so slightly. The crowd leaned in, sensing the shift. The narrator's voice, quiet yet electric, carried the moment forward. You see, it wasn't the action scenes or the physical demands that had carved deep lines into Liam's face. It was grief. It was the relentless, aching emptiness that followed him off set, into the night, into the quiet spaces where no director called cut. Jonathan, still silent, tilted his head as if reading something no one else could see. And in that instant, the temperature on the stage dropped. Liam could have brushed off the question, could have smiled and deflected, could have given the safe, well-rehearsed answer. But something, perhaps the weight of the photo still in his pocket, perhaps the gentle patience across from him, cracked his armor. He cleared his throat, his voice low, measured, almost careful. "There are wounds," the narrator intoned, "that never truly close." Liam Neeson had learned to walk among the living while carrying a piece of himself buried with Natasha. Every laugh, every interview, every blockbuster premiere came with a silent echo. She should have been here. As Liam shifted in his seat, something flickered in his eyes, a flicker the cameras caught and the audience felt in their bones. And then Jonathan spoke, not with words, but with presence. He leaned forward, hands folded, eyes locked on Liam's face, offering no solution, no cliché, just a space where Liam's grief was seen. The narrator whispered through the unfolding silence. "Sometimes the toughest men carry the deepest wounds." Liam's jaw clenched, his fingers tightened over the armrest. The studio was silent, every breath held, every heartbeat in sync. For a moment, it was as if the lights, the cameras, the audience, all faded away, leaving only two men and the ghosts they carried. And just as the weight of it all seemed unbearable, just as Liam's eyes began to glisten under the unforgiving studio lights, the screen cut to black. What happened next would reveal a side of Liam Neeson no one had ever seen before. Not on screen, not in interviews, not even in whispers behind closed doors. Stay until the next chapter, where the silence breaks and the truth surfaces. The silence inside the studio was no longer just the absence of sound. It was a presence in itself, a pulsing, heavy stillness that wrapped around every heart in the room, tightening like a fist. Liam sat forward, his head slightly bowed, the bright lights casting sharp shadows across his face. The narrator's voice drew the audience deeper. For years, Liam Neeson had carried a grief too large to name. His life, his fame, his legacy. None of it had filled the space Natasha left behind, and now, under the harsh spotlight, something inside him trembled on the edge of breaking. Jonathan Roumie sat across from him, calm, still like a man waiting at the edge of a storm. He didn't interrupt, didn't push, he simply let the air hold. Slowly, Liam exhaled, his fingers once rigid, softened, and then, in a voice so low the microphones barely caught it, he began to speak. He spoke of the day she fell, of the frantic rush to the hospital, of the hours that stretched like lifetimes as he waited by her side, the quiet details, the scent of the hospital sheets, the weight of her hand in his, the awful realization that no amount of strength, no amount of fame or wealth could reverse what had been set in motion. The audience leaned forward, barely breathing. This was not the Liam Neeson they knew, the man of unshakable resolve, the hero who always found a way. This was Liam stripped bare, revealing the raw, aching truth that had haunted him since that fateful day. "Grief," the narrator whispered, "is a language few dare to speak." And here, on this stage, Liam Neeson was not just speaking it, he was living it, every word a step deeper into the unhealed wound. Jonathan listened, hands still folded, eyes steady, not judging, not fixing, just being present. Liam's voice trembled as he admitted the nights he screamed into pillows, the mornings he stared at his reflection, wondering why he was still here. He confessed that he had cursed God, cursed fate, cursed himself, that even the love of his children, the devotion of fans, the distraction of work, none of it had filled the hollow space she left behind. The narrator carried the weight. In that moment, the world saw a man unmade, not by his enemies, not by the passage of time, but by the sheer force of love lost. The cameras caught every flicker of pain, every flicker of vulnerability. But the true power wasn't in the words Liam spoke. It was in the space Jonathan offered, the quiet permission to be human, to fall apart without shame. And then, when the silence stretched too long, when the audience began to shift uncomfortably in their seats, Jonathan leaned forward, his voice soft yet clear. He didn't offer platitudes, he didn't preach. He simply asked, "What if she's been with you all this time? Not gone, just waiting?" Liam froze, his breath hitched. His eyes widened just slightly, the armor cracking further. The narrator's voice slowed, pulling the audience to the edge. And in that fragile moment, the man who had faced down villains, who had delivered justice with fists and fury, found himself confronting the one thing he had never been able to defeat, the unbearable hope that love, even after death, might still reach across the veil. But was Liam ready to believe it? And what would happen when the walls he'd built so carefully for years came crumbling down? Stay with us. The next chapter will shatter everything you thought you knew. The stage felt smaller now, not because the cameras had moved, not because the lights dimmed, but because the world had narrowed down to two men, two stories, two hearts laid bare. The narrator's voice held the tension, threading it delicately through every second. Liam Neeson had spent his life mastering control. In his films, his characters knew what to do, when to strike, how to win. But here, under the quiet gaze of Jonathan Roumie, there was no script, no plan, no rescue. Only truth. Liam swallowed hard, his throat tight. The simple question, "What if she's been with you all along?" echoed in his chest like a challenge he had never been prepared to face. The audience could see the flicker in his eyes, the tiny war playing out behind them. His mind wanted to resist, to push back, to dismiss the idea as wishful thinking, but his heart was desperate for a crack in the walls he'd built. Jonathan didn't press. He sat in patient silence, allowing Liam to wrestle inside himself. It was a silence that invited, not demanded, a response. And slowly, carefully, Liam leaned forward. His voice was hoarse, edged with years of buried pain. "I've shouted at the walls," the narrator carried Liam's confession, "shouted at the sky. I've sat in the dark, convinced that if there was a God, he had abandoned me, that no one was listening, that Natasha was gone." The raw honesty cut through the air like a blade. The audience shifted, many wiping tears, others holding their breath. Jonathan's eyes softened, his posture never shifting. He offered no easy answers, no magic solution, only presence, only stillness, only the quiet strength of someone who understood loss, who had walked through his own deserts of faith. The narrator leaned in. Faith isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper. Sometimes it's a breath you didn't know you still had. And sometimes it's the fragile hope that even when we feel abandoned, we are not alone. Liam's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white. For a moment it seemed as if he might retreat, as if the old defenses were about to slam back into place. But then, his shoulders trembled, his fists opened, his head bowed. Tears, silent and heavy, traced down his cheeks. The audience watched, captivated, as the man who had played the unbreakable hero on screen now allowed himself to break, to bleed, to weep. Not for the cameras, not for the public, but for himself. The narrator's voice slowed, each word landing like a heartbeat. In that moment, Liam Neeson was no longer the star, the fighter, the legend. He was just a man, longing to believe that love somehow still reached him. Jonathan reached across the space, his hand resting gently on Liam's arm, not as a priest, not as a savior, but as a friend. The air thickened with emotion, the weight of unspoken grief filling every corner of the room. Liam's voice broke softly. Do you really believe she can see me?" The narrator let the words hang, delicate and trembling, like a leaf in the wind. Jonathan closed his eyes briefly, exhaling a breath filled with something deeper than certainty. Something like surrender. What Jonathan said next would not only change Liam's understanding of love, but it would echo far beyond the studio, touching everyone who had ever wondered if the bonds of the heart truly survive beyond the veil. Stay with us. The next chapter holds the answer Liam never expected. The room felt suspended, as if time itself dared not move. Liam Neeson sat there, shoulders trembling, the question still lingering between them. Do you really believe she can see me? The narrator's voice flowed like a quiet river through the tension. There are moments when answers are not given in words, but in presence. When what we long to hear is not a fact, but a truth that slips past logic, sinking deep into the marrow of who we are. Jonathan Roumie opened his eyes, his expression soft, not filled with certainty, but with something far more powerful: compassion. He didn't rush to fill the silence. He didn't quote scripture, didn't offer hollow reassurances. He simply leaned closer, his gaze steady, his hand still resting on Liam's arm. And then, with a voice barely above a whisper, Jonathan said what Liam had been starving to hear, though it was not an answer, not a declaration, but a simple human truth. Sometimes, feeling love again is the sign they never really left. The words sank into Liam's chest like a key slipping into a long locked door. His breath hitched. His eyes, red-rimmed and glassy, stared down at his trembling hands. The narrator's voice slowed, wrapping around the moment. The man who had faced down kidnappers, assassins, warlords and villains now sat face to face with something no fist could strike, no weapon could conquer, the delicate, devastating hope that love survives. For a long stretch, Liam said nothing. The audience was silent, spellbound. The cameras, usually hungry for movement, held still, as if the moment itself deserved to breathe. And then, without warning, Liam gave the smallest of nods. Not a grand gesture, not a sweeping revelation. Just a quiet acceptance, as if the war inside him had at last laid down its arms. Tears streamed down his face, unhidden, unashamed. He pressed a trembling hand to his heart, closing his eyes. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, he allowed himself not to carry the burden alone. Jonathan offered no more words, no preaching, no fanfare. He simply sat with Liam, hand resting lightly on his, sharing the silence, sharing the weight. The narrator whispered, drawing the viewer into the fragile peace. Redemption doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives in a whisper, in a hand on your shoulder, in a truth that doesn't erase the pain, but transforms it. And in that moment, Liam Neeson, the man, not the legend, took his first unsteady step toward healing. The studio, the lights, the cameras, they all faded in importance. What mattered was the unseen, the unscripted, the undeniable truth unfolding quietly between two men who, in the eyes of the world, could not have been more different. Yet, in that moment, were exactly the same. And then, without a word, Liam rose from his seat. He didn't look back. He didn't wave to the audience. He simply walked off stage, leaving behind not just the cameras, but a piece of the burden he had carried for far too long. The narrator's final words wrapped the viewer tightly. This moment wasn't planned. This moment wasn't rehearsed, but everyone who witnessed it knew they had seen something real. A glimpse of the unseen. A reminder that even the hardest hearts can break open and begin again. What happened backstage, no one captured on camera, but what Liam carried out of that studio would ripple through his life in ways none of us could imagine. If this story touched you, share it, subscribe, and remember, someone you know may need to hear this today. If this story moved you, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. It helps us share these powerful moments with more people who need hope today. And tell us in the comments, have you ever felt the presence of someone you've lost? Your story might inspire someone else right now.